Hi, my name is Samuel, and I'm feeling much better now, thank you. In this installment, I will try to give a better overall description of the game I'm aiming to make. In the first video, I didn't realise quite how much I'd get carried away with the editing, and I can't afford to risk burning out, so I will be keeping it less elaborate this time. Keeping tangents to a minimum is not my forte. So on to something closely related, we are going to be talking about I have trouble keeping to a plan, but with a large project like this, I have learned that there is usually a very detailed plan, and it is called a games design document. As far as I understand it, it's kind of a true north to set your compass to during development. Modern AAA development might have a wiki system or some newfangled living document to keep a large team on task, so perhaps just having a monolithic design document might be a bit old hat. But the more I read and listen to experienced game devs, the more important it seemed to have a fully realised design doc, even for a small project, even for small teams, so I resolved to make one. I already had this Word document I'd been filling up with any and all ideas that might be cool for a game, so I made another version of it, and I started whittling it down. I had a rough idea of what I wanted from this game, so I tried to be ruthless, kill your darlings and all that. Eventually I found a pretty clear distinction between what I could lose and what I couldn't bear to lose. In the interest of reaching reasonable scope, I even chopped away some of the stuff I desperately wanted to try, but I promised myself I could perhaps try those things in another game one day. As far as the scope goes, I've been using other games as rough guides to how big this project should be. So think Darkest Dungeon, Stardew Valley, Zelda Minish Cap, and Undertale. Partly why I continue to use them as design cornerstones is that I can wrap my brain around their scale. I know those games cover to cover, so to speak, and while they might still be regarded as ambitious projects for a single person, I can get a real feel of their scope. So I think that's a reasonable size to aim for. So with my somewhat slapdash design document, we have the rough size we're aiming for. So on to the makeup of the thing. I want multiple memorable areas, each with its own character and atmosphere. I want it to feel archaeological, like you're hunting for hidden items and secret knowledge. I want it to feel like your choices matter. I want there to be characters who are also memorable and charming. I want there to be land development and exponential growth aspects of a farming sim. Are these design pillars? I'm not entirely sure of the lingo. Well, all that together could add up to a really expansive project, so I've tried to distill what's cool about these things so I can implement them in a more streamlined manner than they are perhaps found in other games. So the first thing is areas. So those 5 areas I mentioned in the first video, we have classic video game lush countryside. It branches into muddy slums and dark pine forest areas. Then we have a desert civilization with a mountainous area and an oasis. A jungle area, which I tend to be utterly terrifying. And then we have 2 areas more unique to my world. So these have varying degrees of fantasy feel, and most areas will have wilderness and populated town areas. It isn't open world, but it isn't totally linear either. Perhaps the size and complexity of Baldur's Gate 2, perhaps. I wrote perhaps twice there. Secret hunting is a bit of a mixed bag. I want it to be that it isn't just collecting a bunch of hidden things like Breath of the Wild, more of an actual reward for your exploration or clue following. That isn't just a collectathon, but it actually deepens your immersion. For instance, I like when you find a rare and meaningful item in like a Souls game. You may have already heard of this item, it's usually in an environmentally relevant place, and it will have a description which adds to your understanding of the world and its history. You know when you find relics in Uncharted, and they fit the history and the culture of the place you're in? Like that. It's relevant, it's interesting, maybe it's valuable. A fitting reward for a task well performed. On clue following, this may be unpopular with most, but I love being expected to take notes in a game. So as you bumble around, you may see something strange, like a rune or a sigil or a hidden door or something, and think, well, this may have some importance, but I don't know what that is right now. So you jot it down, note its location or something, and then someone later on mentions a door, or you find a drawing of the thing, and you go, oh, I wrote this down. Suddenly you are being rewarded for thinking of noting the thing down, and it's quite rewarding for me. I'm sure most people will just use a wiki, but I know my people are out there, so there will be no hand-holding. Meaningful choices. This is a tricky one. I began writing this bit, and I realized I have a lot more to say about this than I anticipated, so there may be another video on that. not to sound too much like a YouTuber. As far as choices in my game go, I want emotionally meaningful events to happen as a consequence of your actions as a player in gameplay and dialogue choices. This can lead to stories with which you interact to ultimately end in different ways. I don't want a karma system or a binary set of good or bad options, but choices with risk and unforeseen consequences for better and worse. Sometimes you must make the best of a bad situation, or sometimes you choose the fate of a character. Maybe you're given the opportunity to sacrifice something that's important to you. I want player interaction to have effects on the world around them, which might mean areas having different states as different things happen within them. So maybe a war burns through a village, perhaps there is a flood or a carnival, or that kind of thing. It isn't surprising that things that hit me hardest in games are emotionally charged events with characters I become invested in, for good and for bad. This kind of hinges on the quality of writing of those characters and events, leading us into... Over the years, I've written quite a few characters and stories, and it's hard to convey exactly what I have in mind without just showing those characters and telling those stories. So I'll use some established examples to give you an idea of what we're aiming for. For instance, in Undertale, it's emotionally charged because of the lovable and hateable characters being in various emotional situations. Undertale has a relatively small roster of colourful characters, and with each character you get some time to get to know them, to see how they live, their opinions on world events, and even like their relationships with other characters. A lot of the characters are bombastic and relatable, but they also have like absurd comedic moments which are all very endearing. And it would be silly of me to think I could achieve the same level of overwhelming charm Undertale has, but also my writing is considerably more grim. So in a bit of a left turn, Game of Thrones has some lovable and hateable characters who have to deal with some overwhelmingly horrific events, with various outcomes for them all. While I, like most, think the show's fumbled a lot of the characters' payoffs, upon watching through again recently, I realised there's still a lot of great character work. Felt that the characters were products of these different cultures and experiences they had, and they really are memorable characters, which altogether I think shows that their writing was rich and well realised, at least for most of the show. In my game, I'm aiming for something similar to these two rosters of characters. So it's a small roster of really distinct characters from various cultures, with some time to get to know them, even see them in action sometimes, and having your choices affect their lives. Let's say a handful of cutscenes each, with the ability to converse with them between plot points. I have a handful of characters already conceptualized, and I think people will like them for various reasons. Home customization. I like when I can customize an area which I call home, because it makes me feel like it actually is mine. This is the most fully formed concept I have so far. Your farm, the isle, and the ways to develop it. It might sound good to have a colossal farm with tens of thousands of tiles, but actually the cool part for me is having to make tough choices about how I'm using the space I'm given. So let's make the farm a little restricted, less even than Stardew. And yes, I know that's going to upset some people, but it will force you to get creative. And also, we probably won't have the supermassive variety of other farming sims. I don't want hundreds of crops, hundreds of meals to cook, and dozens of workbenches and crafting processes, but I do want to be able to make a variety of choices about which crops and produce I am making at home. So let's pare that down to a meaningful number of those things. I'm also quietly excited by the prospect of handing people the means to customize something and eventually see what they get up to. It's a nice communal thing. So these are the ingredients, and this is the scope that I'm aiming for. We'll all have an overarching plotline involving the player character and the isle, but these things here, this is most of what you'll be doing. I may do an in-depth video on each of these things as they develop, but I think that is the outline. And that is Devlog 1. I hope one day to look back on these and think, oh god, that's what I had in mind at the time. Look at how far we've come. I live in hope.